The Spanish Inquisition is remembered as the first and possibly the most terrifying example of the thought police. It was established to rid Spain of heretics. The political and religious leaders of Spain believed that heresy would spread like a disease and prevent them from unifying the population under one flag, one royalty, and most importantly, under one religion.
I think the need for the Inquisition in late medieval Spain was a reflection of the fact that there were so many different races and peoples living in this same peninsula. There were Jews, there were Moors, and of course the Christians were always the most important, but at times they felt threatened by the power, the wealth, and the otherness of the other cultures that were living in Iberia at the time.
The Inquisition itself was a roving religious court that sought out and punished crimes against God and the Catholic Church. In the process, cleansing Spain of its religious and cultural diversity. It recruited thousands of anonymous informants and shrouded its methods in a cloak of secrecy. Records from the time reveal the atmosphere of fear it generated.
Everyone shudders at its very name, as it has supreme authority over property, life, honor, and even the souls of men.
Modern academics are re-examining the available evidence and drawing dramatic new conclusions about why the Inquisition began, how it worked, and why it was allowed to last for over 300 years. The Inquisition employed scribes who, like modern secretaries, kept detailed records of all its work. These documents provide a real understanding not only of the methods it employed, but also of the psychological effects on its suspects. At the heart of the Inquisition's work was the interrogation. A prisoner would be grilled for hours on end. These ancient and sinister methods have lived on, aped in the modern world by oppressive political and religious regimes, from the Gestapo to the KGB. The interrogation would start calmly enough, with seemingly innocent questions about the prisoner's lifestyle and that of his family.
The Inquisition would interrogate you at length about what you did and what your family did. Because it wasn't only you that they were concerned with, it was everybody that you might know, what they called your accomplices. And they will say to you, what is your name? Do you know why you've been arrested? No. The Inquisition does not arrest people for nothing. Are you aware of that? If you say so. Have you anything to say to us? Any confession you make? Because the voluntary confession was the one which would get you off with least trouble. No, I have nothing to say. I don't know why you've arrested me. Go down to the cell and think about it.
A prisoner might be locked up in solitary confinement for weeks, even months on end. The jailer his only human contact. But eventually the Inquisitor would call on them to answer more questions and to pressure the prisoner into confession.
You might then come up next time and the Inquisitor would say, well, have you anything to tell us? And you might say, well, you know when so-and-so says that I was there? Well, actually, it was like this, and I can remember now, it's a long time ago.
At this point, the prisoner might hope that a small confession would be enough for the Inquisitor to stop the interrogation.
On the contrary, the Inquisition picks away at the scab, or if you like, it pulls the string, and in the end, the psychological pressure, the loneliness, the anxiety about your family, the anxiety about yourself, means that in the end, you will probably simply be unable to withstand the pressure, and you'll want to confess.
The Inquisition did not hurry its justice. Some trials and interrogations lasted years, during which the prisoners languished in jail. But in the eyes of their captors, the prisoners had committed the most vile crime of the medieval world: heresy. It's unfamiliar to us now, but in those days, heresy, to question the word of God as written in the Bible, was a very serious crime, in many ways worse than murder. A murderer could at least be forgiven, and his soul could ascend to heaven. But an unrepentant heretic was on a one-way journey to hell.
Heresy, believing things that the church said were untrue, heresy imperiled your soul. And there's almost a way of seeing it as analogous to that great fear we have today of cancer, because heresy was seen as an illness which could rot your entire spiritual well-being to the point that you were beyond redemption. What's more, and perhaps in this case heresy is worse than cancer, you could catch it from other people.
The Inquisition saw itself as a surgeon acting on the wishes of the all-powerful Catholic Church. It had to cut out the cancer of heresy from the minds of the Spanish people before it spread any further. Symptoms of heresy were many and various, from doubting the resurrection of Christ to sexual indiscretions like adultery and homosexuality. You could also find yourself facing the Inquisition for what today would seem like the most casual and insignificant remark.
You could make, for example, a heretical statement. A man is sitting around the table, he's playing cards, and he starts to swear and curse, and he curses the Virgin Mary and says, couldn't be a virgin, it's impossible. Not in nature, it's not natural, it should be so. Somebody would report him to the Inquisition would summons him, and he would be asked, what did he mean by that?
Not only did the Inquisition take an interest in remarks that questioned Christian beliefs, they also investigated people whose morality, particularly sexual morality, veered from Christian teaching. This had a bewildering effect in peasant communities.
Other things that they were brought before the Inquisition on was particularly this notion of simple fornication, which was saying that you believed that it was okay for two single people to have sex. Not actually doing it, but saying that you believed that it was okay. Of course, within peasant culture, where premarital and extramarital sex were a regular part of peasant lives, it made absolutely no sense to them that sex between single people would not be all right.
But in the eyes of the Inquisition, it made perfect sense. A heresy had been committed. If an interrogation didn't produce an adequate explanation, the Inquisitor might call upon the services of the most feared servant of the Spanish Inquisition, the torturer. Actual torture techniques were many and various, from simple flogging to more elaborate and imaginative methods. The strapado was a variant on hanging. The victim was first rendered motionless by having their feet and hands bound. With their arms forced behind their backs, they were hoisted off the ground, causing massive strain on the shoulders. This pain was intensified by dropping the victim. Stopping the fall just short of the ground would give the victim a huge jolt, dislocating the shoulders with an audible snap. The Inquisitor could then step in and continue the questioning, hoping the pain would prompt a different response. But as modern academics now realize, the use of torture, while traumatic, was very much the norm in this unsophisticated age.
There was no alternative, or at least they didn't see any alternative. I mean, they didn't have mind-altering drugs or anything like that at that time, truth serums. There was no alternative if you were sure that a person had more to say but was quite deliberately impeding the work of the Inquisition by refusing to confess, or if you thought, and this was common enough, that a person was saying nothing in order to defend or protect, say, members of their families. So sometimes the Inquisition sought no alternative but to order torture.
But what heresy was so serious and damaging that it required the establishment of an Inquisition? Examination of the records reveals the answer. Quite simply, being Jewish. Medieval Europe was not a pleasant place to be Jewish. Tensions between Jews and Christians had been strained since the days of the New Testament. Christian teaching at the time stated that the Jews were responsible for the crucifixion of Christ, and they refused to accept him as the Son of God. Jews were persecuted at various times in many European countries. It wasn't difficult to stir up anti-Jewish feelings in 14th century Christendom. All that was needed was something or someone to ignite the fuse of hatred.
Communities can live together peacefully for generations in medieval Spain, I suppose, just as in the Balkans today. It doesn't go beyond local politics until, that is, somebody decides that it's in their interests to make a bigger issue out of these tensions.
A well-known anti-Jewish preacher named Ferran Martínez did just that. In 1391, he exploited a temporary lack of church leadership in Seville and used his position to incite actual physical violence against local Jews. In scenes that echo the early persecutions of Jews in Nazi Germany, a Christian mob marched into the city's Jewish quarter. They trapped hundreds in the narrow alleys and began a series of assaults. So intense was the violence and panic that in one particular street, hundreds of Jews lost their lives. The street is now known as Calle de la Muerte, the Street of the Dead. Between June and August of